Ma'am, can I see some identification, please?
We've got a report your paperwork might be incomplete. We need to verify it.
Of course. I'm a U.S. citizen and a licensed pilot. I'm rostered to fly this afternoon. Everything is in order. Here are my credentials. Go ahead and run them.
We'll take a quick look.
Thank you.
Man, we're gonna need you to step over here with us while we verify.
March 14th, 2024. Terminal C, Gate 47. It's 10:42 in the morning at one of the nation's busiest airports. Spring break travelers fill every seat. Business executives tap urgently at laptops. Families wrangle restless children while eyeing departure boards. Flight 2817 to Chicago is scheduled to depart in 98 minutes. The captain has just arrived. She moves through the terminal with the practiced efficiency of someone who's made this walk thousands of times. Navy blue uniform, 4 gold stripes on each shoulder. Her rolling suitcase trails behind her like a shadow. She doesn't know that in less than an hour she'll be in handcuffs. She doesn't know that her face will be plastered across social media by sunset. She doesn't know that what's about to happen will leave more questions than answers. What she does know is this: she's qualified, credentialed, and prepared to do her job. What happens next depends on who you ask. This is the story of Captain Aisha Reynolds. Before we continue, if you're finding this investigation compelling, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Drop a comment below telling us where in the world you're watching from. Now, back to the story. Aisha Marie Reynolds didn't grow up dreaming of flying. She grew up watching. Born in Detroit in 1981, she spent childhood summers at her grandfather's small aviation maintenance shop near Coleman Young Airport. While other kids played with dolls, she learned the difference between a turboprop and a turbofan engine. Her grandfather would tell her, "Aviation doesn't care about anything except competence. You're either qualified or you're not." She believed him. At 16, she earned her private pilot's license, one of the youngest in her county. At 23, she graduated from Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University with honors. By 30, she was a first officer at a regional carrier. At 42, after accumulating over 12,000 flight hours, Captain Reynolds commanded wide-body aircraft for one of America's largest airlines. Her record was spotless. Not a single colleagues described her as unflappable. Flight attendants requested her routes. Passengers often waited after landing just to thank her for smooth approaches in rough weather. She'd flown through thunderstorms over the Atlantic. She'd navigated equipment failures at 35,000 feet. She'd landed safely when others might have panicked. But nothing in her training prepared her for what would happen on an ordinary Thursday morning. March 14th began like any other day. She woke at 5:30 a.m. in a hotel room 12 miles from the airport. She reviewed weather reports, NOTAMs, and her flight plan. She ate a light breakfast. She put on her uniform with the same precision she applied to every pre-flight checklist. At 9:47 a.m., she arrived at the airport. At 10:23 a.m., she cleared security using her known crew member access. At 10:41 a.m., she approached Gate 47 to meet her first officer and conduct the pre-flight briefing. At 10:43 a.m., 3 federal agents stepped into her path. The first agent is tall, maybe 6'2", wearing a dark windbreaker with agency insignia on the chest. His partner stands slightly behind him, hand resting near his belt. A third agent, a woman with pulled-back hair and an unreadable expression, positions herself to Captain Reynolds' left. They don't introduce themselves. They don't explain. They simply ask, "Ma'am, can we see your identification?" Captain Reynolds stops. Her rolling suitcase bumps gently against her leg. She's confused, but not alarmed. Not yet. Airport personnel face random security checks occasionally. It's unusual this close to a gate. Unusual for crew in full uniform, but not impossible. She reaches into her uniform blazer and produces her airline-issued ID badge, then her driver's license, then, unprompted, her FAA Airline Transport Pilot Certificate, the highest level of pilot certification in the United States. I'm the captain for Flight 2817, she says calmly. Is there a problem? The first agent examines her documents without meeting his eyes. He tilts the ID toward the light, as if checking for forgeries. He studies her photograph, then her face, then the photograph again. 20 seconds pass, 30. Passengers waiting at gate 47 begin to notice. A teenage girl taps her mother's arm and points. Ma'am, what's your citizenship status? The second agent asks. Captain Reynolds blinks. I'm a U.S. citizen, she says, now with a slight edge of confusion creeping into her voice. Born in Detroit. I can provide my passport if you need it. She does. She opens her suitcase, slowly, deliberately, narrating her movements like she's guiding a nervous passenger through turbulence, and retrieves a U.S. passport. Valid. Unstamped from recent international travel because she hasn't flown internationally in 6 weeks. The agents pass it between themselves. More seconds tick by. The third agent speaks for the first time. Can you explain your travel history? My travel history? Captain Reynolds repeats. I'm a commercial airline pilot, she says, her voice still measured, still professional. I fly domestic and international routes. My flight records are maintained by my employer and the FAA. I've provided all my credentials. Can you please tell me what this is about? The first agent doesn't answer. Instead, he keys his radio and speaks quietly into his shoulder mic. Captain Reynolds can't hear what he says, but she can feel the air changing around her. By now, Gate 47 is watching. Some passengers record on their phones, others whisper to each other, craning their necks to see. A gate agent hovers nearby, clipboard clutched to her chest, uncertain whether to intervene. Captain Reynolds remains calm. Years of training have taught her to manage stress, to compartmentalize emotion, to focus on procedure. But inside, a knot is forming. Am I being detained? She asks, clearly, loudly enough for those nearby to hear. The agents exchange glances. We just need to verify some information, the first agent says. I've provided everything, she responds. My employer is expecting me. My first officer is waiting. I have a flight to operate in less than 90 minutes. If there's a specific concern, I'd like to address it now. A fourth person arrives, a supervisor, judging by his bearing. He's older, gray at the temples, wearing the same agency jacket. He confers quietly with the three agents, while Captain Reynolds stands 3 feet away, still holding her credentials. She checks her watch. 10:51 a.m. The pre-flight briefing should have started 6 minutes ago. Her first officer, a younger white man named Marcus Chen, appears at the edge of the gate area. He sees his captain surrounded by federal agents and freezes, visibly confused. Captain Reynolds makes brief eye contact with him. She gives a small, controlled shake of her head. Stay back. The supervisor turns to her. Captain Reynolds, he says, the first time anyone has used her name. We need you to step away from the gate area. Why? She asks. We have some follow-up questions. About what? He doesn't answer directly. Instead, he gestures toward a hallway adjacent to the gate, away from the crowd. Am I free to decline? She presses. A pause. We'd prefer your cooperation, the supervisor says. It's not a yes, it's not a no. It's the language of ambiguity that leaves little room for refusal. Captain Reynolds takes a slow breath. She's aware of the phones pointed at her. She's aware of her first officer watching helplessly. She's aware that her passengers are witnessing their captain being questioned in a manner that raises more questions than it answers. She makes a decision. I'll cooperate, she says, but I need to notify my airline and my first officer that there's a delay. The supervisor nods. She turns toward Marcus, who's pulled out his phone, and calls out, "Contact dispatch. Tell them we have a regulatory delay. I'll update you as soon as I can." Marcus nods, wide-eyed. Captain Reynolds follows the agents into the hallway. The last thing passengers at Gate 47 see is her rolling suitcase disappearing around the corner, 4 federal agents flanking her in formation. The hallway is quieter. Fluorescent lights hum overhead. The sounds of the terminal fade to a muffled murmur. They stop near an unmarked door. "Captain Reynolds," the supervisor begins, "we've received information that requires further verification of your identity and authorization to work." She stares at him. "Authorization to work?" she repeats slowly. "I've been flying for this airline for 11 years. I've been a licensed pilot for 24 years. What information specifically are you referring to?" "I can't disclose that at this time." Her jaw tightens. For the first time, a flicker of something crosses her face. Not fear, not anger, something else. Realization. "Is this about my citizenship?" she asks quietly. "This is about verifying documentation," the supervisor says. "I've shown you my documentation. We need to confirm its validity. It is valid. You can call my airline, you can call the FAA, you can call the State Department. Everything I've shown you is real, current, and verifiable within minutes." The supervisor doesn't respond. Instead, he exchanges a glance with the tall agent. Something unspoken passes between them. "Captain Reynolds," the supervisor says, "at this time we're going to need you to come with us for additional processing." "Processing?" Her voice sharpens. "What does that mean?" "We're detaining you pending verification." The word hangs in the air like smoke. Detaining. "On what grounds?" demands she. "What law have I violated? What probable cause do you have?" "Immigration compliance checks operate under different protocols," the supervisor says, his tone neutral but firm. "I'm a U.S. citizen. I was born in Detroit. I have a U.S. passport. What immigration issue could there possibly be?" "That's what we're determining." Captain Reynolds feels the walls closing in. She knows her rights, or she thinks she does, but in this moment, surrounded by armed federal agents in a secure area of an airport, theory and practice feel very different. "I want to contact my airline's legal department," she says firmly. "You'll have an opportunity to make a call," the supervisor replies. "When?" "After processing." Back at Gate 47, confusion is turning to chaos. First Officer Chen is on the phone with dispatch, trying to explain a situation he doesn't fully understand himself. The gate agent makes an announcement. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing a brief delay with Flight 2817. We'll update you shortly." Groans ripple through the waiting area. A businessman shouts, "How long?" The gate agent doesn't have an answer. By 11:10 a.m., 30 minutes before scheduled departure, the airline makes a decision. Flight 2817 is officially delayed indefinitely. They need to find a replacement captain. The nearest available pilot is 2 hours away. Passengers are told they'll receive updates via the airline app. Some accept this. Others explode. "I have a wedding," a woman in her 30s shouts at the gate agent. "I'm the maid of honor. I can't miss this flight." A man in a suit slams his fist on the counter. "I have a presentation at 4 p.m. This is unacceptable." One passenger, a college student named Derek Morrison, has been recording since the agents first approached Captain Reynolds. He uploads a 30-second clip to social media with a caption, "Female pilot just detained by federal agents at the airport. Something doesn't add up here." Within 20 minutes, it has 50,000 views. Within an hour, it has 300,000. By evening, it will have millions. At 12:47 p.m., 2 hours and 47 minutes after Captain Reynolds was first stopped, a replacement captain arrives. She's a white woman in her 50s, named Captain Linda Howell. She's professional, experienced, and visibly uncomfortable with the circumstances. As she walks through the terminal toward Gate 47, passengers who've been following the story online recognize the uniform and shout questions. "Where's the other captain? Why was she arrested? What's really going on?" Captain Howell keeps her head down and says nothing. Flight 2817 finally departs at 1:33 p.m., 3 hours and 13 minutes late. The maid of honor misses the wedding rehearsal dinner. The businessman misses his presentation. Dozens of passengers miss connections, hotel reservations, and plans they'd made months in advance. And Captain Aisha Reynolds is still in federal custody. The processing room is small and sterile. A metal table, 4 chairs, a camera mounted in the corner. its red light blinking steadily. Captain Reynolds sits with her hands folded, still in her uniform, still composed, but barely. She's been fingerprinted, photographed, asked the same questions multiple times by multiple agents. Where were you born? What's your social security number? Have you ever used another name? Have you traveled to any of the following countries in the past 5 years? She answers each question with the same calm precision she uses to read pre-landing checklists. But inside, something is shifting. For just a moment, sitting in that sterile room, Captain Reynolds allows herself to remember. She remembers being 8 years old, standing in her grandfather's hangar, watching a small Cessna taxi past. She'd asked him, "Papa, can someone like me really fly those?" He'd knelt down, looked her straight in the eyes, and said, "Baby girl, the sky doesn't see color. It only sees skill." She'd built her entire career on that belief, that excellence would be enough, that credentials would speak louder than assumptions, that the uniform, those 4 gold stripes, would command the respect she'd earned. Sitting in that processing room, she wonders for the first time if her grandfather was wrong, or if the sky was never really the problem. At 2:18 p.m., 3 hours and 35 minutes after the initial stop, an agent she hasn't seen before enters the room. He's carrying a folder. He sits across from her, opens it, reviews something briefly, then closes it again. "Captain Reynolds," he says, "you're free to go." She doesn't move. "What?" she says quietly. "Your documentation has been verified. You're free to go." What was the issue? The matter has been resolved. Then what was the problem in the first place? He doesn't answer. Instead, he slides her credentials across the table, her ID, her license, her passport, her pilot certificate. "You can collect your belongings and leave," he says. "I want an explanation," she says, her voice steady but insistent. "I want to know what triggered this. I want to know what information you received. I want to understand what happened today." The agent stands. "We appreciate your cooperation," he says, and then he leaves. Captain Reynolds sits alone in the processing room for another 4 minutes. Then, slowly, she gathers her credentials. She stands. She walks out. By the time Captain Reynolds emerges from detention, her name is trending. Derek Morrison's video has been shared by civil rights organizations, pilots' unions, and national news outlets. The hashtag Captain Reynolds is being used thousands of times per hour. The responses are divided, passionate, and revealing. Some view the incident as evidence of systemic issues in security protocols. A professional with impeccable credentials detained for hours without explanation? We need answers about what standards are being applied and to whom. Others urge caution before drawing conclusions. We don't know what information the agents had. There may be security factors we're not privy to. Context matters. Still others defend the agents' actions entirely. They were following procedure. If you comply and you're innocent, you get released. That's exactly what happened here. The airline releases a statement at 4:47 p.m. "We are aware of an incident involving one of our crew members earlier today. The safety and dignity of our employees is our highest priority. We are reviewing the circumstances and will cooperate fully with relevant authorities." It says nothing about Captain Reynolds by name. It says nothing about the delay. It says nothing about accountability. The federal agency releases its own statement at 6:13 p.m. "Our agents conduct compliance verification operations in accordance with federal regulations and established protocols. All individuals encountered are treated professionally. The matter referenced has been concluded." It says nothing why Captain Reynolds was stopped. It says nothing what information prompted the detention. It says nothing whether protocols were followed appropriately or require review. Captain Reynolds doesn't speak to the media. Her union releases a brief statement on her behalf. Captain Reynolds is a dedicated professional who has served this airline and her passengers with distinction. She is taking time to process today's events with her family and legal counsel. She asks for privacy at this time. And then silence. No investigation is announced. No review of procedures is made public. No official explanation is ever given. 3 weeks later, Captain Aisha Reynolds returns to work. She flies the same routes. She wears the same uniform. She performs the same pre-flight checks with the same meticulous care. Passengers who recognize her sometimes approach after landing. Some thank her. Some apologize. Some ask what really happened. She smiles politely and says she can't discuss it. But here's what the documented record shows. Captain Reynolds was stopped, questioned, and detained for over 3 hours despite providing valid documentation and full cooperation. Her detention caused a major flight disruption affecting hundreds of people. She was released without charges, without public explanation, without stated cause for the initial stop. No accountability measures have been publicly disclosed. No procedural changes have been announced. No transparency has been offered to those seeking to understand what occurred.
Was it a case of mistaken identity? Was it a data discrepancy in interconnected security systems that flag certain profiles differently than others? Was it a breakdown in protocol, a failure to follow established verification procedures before initiating detention? Was it an example of how implicit bias can influence split-second decisions even among trained professionals? Or was it something else entirely? A convergence of factors we may never fully understand because institutional transparency was never prioritized. The questions remain, the silence persists, and Captain Aisha Reynolds continues flying, carrying passengers safely to their destinations, navigating questions she can answer and mysteries she cannot. If this investigation made you think, if it raised questions you believe deserve answers, please subscribe to this channel. Hit that notification bell so you never miss our deep dive documentaries exploring the complex intersections of policy, rights, and human experience. Share this video, start conversations, demand transparency from institutions that impact our lives. And tell us in the comments, what questions does this story raise for you? Thank you for watching.